Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Backlog, where I talk to you about the latest and greatest games that came out about 5 years ago as I slowly trudge through my backlog. And I have no idea why I did not play Spider-Man Miles Morales at launch. I know it was a technical spectacle on the PlayStation 5 and an absolute showcase game, but for some reason I didn't. And maybe it's because Spider-Man 2 is releasing in mere days and I got that really sweet Venom Collector Edition, or maybe it's because I was talking to my true love Brent Casina about it, but I finally decided it was time to go back and actually play this game. And it took me about 10 hours to finish it, and it was an amazing ride. I'm probably not telling you anything new here from what you don't know, but I do see some limitations of this game that I'm curious to see if a full-fledged release of Spider-Man 2 will fix. So maybe talking about some of that. And worry not, I'm not going to really get into spoilers. I think the mission you're seeing here is towards the tail end of the game, but I will say that I don't think anything caught me off guard in terms of story elements, the quote-unquote mysteries of who some of the villains were and some of the other characters you meet is quickly resolved. There's not a massive cast of players to work with here, so it's pretty clear kind of what's going on through the story. I was pleasantly surprised actually by the side story, which included a former villain, which I wasn't really expecting. And while it was more of a cameo than anything, it was actually really, really cool that they kind of added in some fun content behind a side story. Because while the main story is good and it tells a pretty interesting story of an up-and-coming Miles Morales trying to navigate his personal and social life as Spider-Man, really the same plight we've seen as a Peter Parker. The big difference here is Miles Morales is kind of a young punk, and he's still figuring out his abilities. Actually, one of the really cool mechanics in this game is your Venom powers, which are these different electricity powers which do insane amount of damage and stun enemies. You see me constantly casting them as you see those orange and kind of yellow electrical charges around the enemies that I hit with. But the really cool thing is the powers, you don't get them all right away. And a lot of them are actually unlocked in the story, not behind a skill tree or anything like that. So you're just going to be playing the game, and through the narrative of the game, you're going to have to rely on one of these powers, and you will unlock it at that moment. You'll actually learn kind of how to use it within the narrative of the story, and it's a really seamless way to kind of explain things to you while you're playing. And I love that the game does this. It does it with not just the Venom powers, but with just about every other system. So it's a really smart tutorial that really kind of helps you understand the best way to play your character, and I love that. It is really, really neat. As with the first Spider-Man, the graphics are insane. This is an absolute showcase game. There's a couple really cool game modes. And I know this came out after launch too. I think this was like a couple months after. I suspect a lot of people may have already beat the game at this point. But because I was so late to the party, I get like the best version of the game, which was great for me. You had your standard like 30 frame per second mode, which had really high fidelity. Well, they went and then a 60, I should say, at launch, and then a 60 frame per second like performance mode, which came out at launch as well, and that took a lot of stuff away. But through the magic of technology, not only did they bring a 60 frame per second ray tracing mode, they also gave you a 120 frame per second performance mode. And I know not everybody has a 120 hertz television display. I do, and holy smokes, one of the smoothest games I have ever played, particularly when you're in insane combat like you're seeing here, or swinging throughout the city. It is so silky smooth, and I know a lot of people say, well, 60 frames per second is good enough. I thought so too. I've been saying this for a while. I'm an absolute 120 frame per second snob, and I'm totally fine with that. And it looks so good. Unfortunately, I don't know how well it translates here. This gameplay footage was streamed from my console up to Twitch and then pulled back down, so there's probably a lot lost in the translation of the ones and zeros, so to speak. but wow, does this game look amazing. If you don't have a 120 hertz display, as long as you have a 60 frame per second TV, which I think that is the standard now. I can't imagine any TV doesn't support that. I think TVs back in like the 1800s supported that. With HDR, even if you have like if like an OLED display, it looks so good. The ray tracing on this game is absolute on point. I know it's some ray tracing light in some instances, but the lighting in this game, the lighting on the costumes, and there are a ton of costumes to select from, and the character faces and the models all look so amazing. It pops out of the screen. Just visually alone, without anything else, this game is a must play already. But considering that it continues the story lightly of Spider-Man 1, and that I feel Miles Morales obviously will play a significant role in Spider-Man 2, I think if you're kind of trekking through that, this is a must play. And it holds up remarkably well considering it's a launch title. I didn't notice any nonsense in this game. The haptic feedback feels great. This game actually even supports a Tempest 3D audio engine. I did try it out with my old PlayStation wireless headphones, and they sounded great. It sounds great on the sound bar. It definitely sounds amazing on my shithell too. The music in the background, that's something that just continues to evolve the game. Particularly Miles always listening to different music, and how the music flares up during combat, and how you have these kind of serene moments when you're flying through the city where the music kind of takes a back seat to the city ambience and the hustle and bustle and the wind rushing through your, I would say your hair, but you're wearing a mask, but you get the point. It just feels so good. The movement feels phenomenal. The controls, the combat, everything about this game is an absolute masterpiece. And if Spider-Man 2 is really just this again, nobody's going to complain. Give us a new original story. Give us a little bit of Peter Parker. Give us a little bit of Miles Morales. Give us a ton of costumes that are rendered amazing with some really fun special effects and some really fun locations to traverse both inside and outside the city. And you're going to have an absolute banger on your hands. And I can't wait, because I know this game's going to be good. I know Spider-Man 2 is going to be amazing. But the original was great, and Miles Morales also remains great. One of the things that I loved so much about this game was the charm on their characters, like their personalities. Miles Morales' personality is very infectious. You really do root for the guy. He's clearly a young kid navigating some crazy stuff, obviously, being a superhero now, but he's just navigating a difficult life at times, and the acting and the tone and everything and the pacing of the game really sells itself to a very enjoyable experience, and I really appreciated that. I wouldn't say it's a perfect game. I would say it's really darn close. There's a couple instances that the game frustrated me. One of the things that I think they do well is they introduce you to collectathons very, like, piecemeal through the game. And they do it in such a way where it doesn't feel overwhelming. But my biggest disappointment is we haven't figured out a way to give more meaningful side content. And again, this could be kind of in the fact that, hey, this game came out, a while ago, so to speak, and the world has changed. But I'm really comparing to a game like God of War that had these massive, long, meaningful, fully voice-acted, fun side quests that really led into some really fun and enjoyable story elements that really fleshed out the game. Here, side quests are like, hey, go get 5 backpacks, or go collect 20 blinking things on the map, or go stop a crime happening down the street. It's just a flex of the existing system. You're still going to be fighting and using all your powers and swinging through the city. It's just kind of directing you into a certain area. And that's how you have to kind of collect your power-up tokens, is by doing all of these various missions. And that's how you unlock some additional moves, and that's how you unlock some additional special effects for your character and that sort of thing. And it just feels out of place, considering this game is so rich. The world is so much fun to explore and swing through. It doesn't feel like they did a really good job of kind of hiding things, and it doesn't feel like they did a good job of adding content. I mean, the map is constantly littered with dozens of different types of icons. You can see my map here a little bit. of all these different random activities that just keep popping up over and over and over. And they're all just very basic collectathons. The best part of this game, besides the main story, of course, the side quests. There are actually 3 side quests that all tie in together that feed into that really cool cameo I was telling you guys about before that I really appreciated. And I was like, wow, we're actually getting like a little snippet of that kind of God of War ancillary story system that kind of was in play. And I love that. So I'm really hopeful that Spider-Man 2 really doubles down on that, and we just get away from these meaningless map clutter things that kind of have to be done if you want to get the platinum, which I didn't. But if you want to kind of go after like more upgrades and you want to try all the different powers and all the different gadgets, you kind of have to do all these things because you're not going to have enough funny money to upgrade your character in the way that you need to. So it just doesn't really make sense to me. And that is a major criticism of this game that just was not fun. The other thing that I struggle with, and while combat is fun and frantic and definitely on point, I mean, they took the Batman style of just insanely fluid combat and flipped it on its head, particularly because of how amazingly nimble Spider-Man is, using webs and using all the different parts of the environment to just destroy people. It's tons and tons of fun. At times, it gets a little too hectic when you have certain characters who can only be basically damaged by certain abilities. You'll find enemies throughout the experience that can't be attacked unless it's not even just a Venom power, it's a specific Venom power. And while stealth does play a big role in this game, and you're about to see that here where I get absolutely trounced because I just basically walk in the front door of this insane building, there must be like 50 guys shooting at me and I'm definitely going to get smoked. You'll see stealth does play a big part of it, which does break up the combat, by the way. Greatly appreciated, sneaking around and destroying people. But the part that frustrates me is that when you're just attacking, I mean, look at how frantic and wild this is. Hitting attack button, trying to collect things, trying to grab different pieces of items to throw at people, to do perfect blocks and dodges and zip around and everything. Because the game doesn't really have a good targeting system, a lot of times you're going to waste your ability, so to speak, on people that you probably didn't want to. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know if this game needs to have rooms and rooms of thousands of enemies. Inversely, it definitely does not need to be a Dark Souls experience where you're fighting somebody one-on-one and it's very hectic and painful and resource managey and you're kind of working through the paces of what that looks like. But what I think it needs to find is a good balance between that. Or maybe get rid of a lot of those characters. I love the diversity, by the way, of the big shield guys and the guys that, you know, can only be attacked by certain things. But the problem is the diversity of cast does limit some of your combat at times because you really kind of have to like, oh, I can't hurt this guy unless I use a certain Venom power. So I kind of just have to stand here and auto attack him or keep dodging until my meter fills up. Then I get my super ability. Then I can hit the enemy and then we can proceed. That does get very frustrating because you'll find that happens time and time and time again, particularly towards the end when the story starts to reach a climax and you're fighting large groups of enemies that are kind of final boss-esque types of enemies. That's definitely something that I want to see improved on the next Spider-Man. Other than that, I think this is a really solid game with really good bones. I think they have a winning formula here. I mean, I think we all collectively agreed that when the original Spider-Man came out, and I think that they continue it here, giving a good balance of funny kind of throwaway missions with very serious missions as well. The upgrade system is kind of basic, but considering you have so much at your disposal from the beginning of the game, a lot of the other stuff you get in different types of gadgets and everything. Moves aren't really locked. A lot of the fun things you can do when you're swinging, gathering experience points by doing crazy flips and all the different zip swings and everything you have. Most of that is unlocked at the beginning of the game, which is great. So you don't really have to worry too much about that aspect of it. However, like I said, I think that the combat can get a little bit of work, and maybe the progression system can somehow be more meaningful. You know, it seems to me like the biggest part of this game's progression system, and I use that word like very loosely, is getting all the different costumes. honestly, I feel like that. I feel like the costume collection is like 70% of the game, which is fun. Again, having to do different side quests and complete different tasks to unlock the various suits in the game, and they're all tons of fun. I'm a really big fan of the Into the Spider-Verse graphic, where you basically play at that lower frame per second, just like the Into the Spider-Verse movie that came out. Either one. I know there's two of them, but this was tied to the first launch one. But it looks insanely jarring, by the way, playing that. I think it's like 15 or 24 frames a second, whatever that kind of jittery animation style is. You can put that on, and let me tell you, when you're playing at 120 frames per second, it looks so weird, but in a cool stylistic way. So the game doesn't take itself too seriously. I think the last half of the game I played with a scarf and like those big muffler things on your ears, like the big earmuffs, because I got them from doing a side quest. And here you're having these dramatic moments, and Spider-Man's dressed like a goober. And it just works. It just works because it's so fun. So, absolutely adored this game. Loved it to pieces. I am so glad that it came out. I know I was very late to this review. I'm going to probably take a break when Spider-Man 2 comes out because I don't want to get over Spider-Man'd, so to speak. And considering how much better this game got over time, particularly with the inclusion of the 120 FPS mode and the inclusion of the 60 frame per second ray tracing mode, pretty good chance I'm not going to dive into Spider-Man 2 right away. I'll definitely open up and take a look at that sweet Venom statue as part of the collector edition, and if there's any kind of cool soundtracks or like goodies, I'll probably look at, but I'll probably wait a while. And considering how much better I think this experience was than people who played it at launch, you might want to do the same. I know there's FOMO, but there's so many good games out right now. I still haven't touched a lot of them, and I'm still feverishly clawing through my backlog as more and more phenomenal games come out, and I continue to buy more games. So I think you're not going to have that issue. But that said, that will wrap up all my thoughts on Spider-Man Miles Morales, an absolute triumph of PlayStation gaming. It is easily one of the best action games I have ever played, despite its shortcomings. And if you haven't yet checked it out, or if you need a refresher on kind of getting ready for Spider-Man 2, it's a pretty tight package. Just skip all the side crap, just kind of golden path it, and I think you're going to have a fun story, and you're going to fall in love with Miles Morales, and you're going to fall in love with this entire kind of gaming world all over again. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.